You hear a lot about snow and the cold in wintertime, but one thing that everyone deals with, even if you live in a warm climate, is less daylight. Some runners may be fortunate enough to run in the afternoon when the sun's out. For the majority of us though, you're likely going to be doing at least some of your training in the dark. This is the time of year when some people put away their running shoes in the closet and wait for springtime. But we know that most of you listening, you're a different breed who love running year round. The treadmill's always an option too, but it's just not the same as getting outside with some fresh air and a change of scenery. This episode is about how to get the most out of winter training, from a safety perspective, but also from a performance perspective. This includes how to adapt your approach so that you get the same aerobic benefit without compromising on your own safety in the dark. We'll cover topics that include how your body perceives running differently in the dark, how you can dress to make yourself visible to others on the roads and sidewalks, how to plan a safe route in the wintertime, and advice for safely fitting in speed sessions for workouts before sunrise and after sunset. So don't get left in the dark when it comes to winter safety, and keep listening for some great training advice. Welcome back to the show, Coach Jeff. I think it is super fitting that we're recording an episode on running in the dark as it is here in Toronto, just early evening around 5:50 and already starting to get dark.
Yeah, and if for those, we're recording the day before or 2 days before daylight savings time. So it's about to be dark in a couple more days. This time of day will be dark for you. So not my favorite time of year, but got to get it done.
I guess the flip side of it is for any early morning runners like myself, and I know for you as well, it does give us that extra hour then.
Yeah, exactly. It's a trade-off. So it depends on when you're running, but still never easy. And it's only going to get darker for another few months.
Jeff, which are you on the stance with the time change? Are you appreciative of the extra hour in the morning, or do you dread it because you're probably running too early in the morning to even benefit from it?
Yeah, I would say that even that, I don't mind running in the morning in the dark. That doesn't bother me. So for me personally, I'm more like the spring ahead is like the better. I like that much better. I just feel like I have more energy in the evenings. I want to go out and do things more. We've talked a lot about like when people do their strength training and stuff. And for me, I almost always do my strength training in the evening. So it's way better to have it lighter outside in the afternoons. It makes it so much, I just feel like the whole day is longer. But everybody's different, for sure. Some people that are maybe running at 6 a.m. definitely really benefit from that extra hour, daily savings time.
Yeah, I do like the extra hour in the morning. I also do like an extra hour of sleeping in is nice.
Yeah, that is nice. You get that one or a couple of days where it's like, oh, wow, you feel like so refreshed when you wake up in the morning. So yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we get into it and answer what seems like an obvious question, but I think is worth exploring, which is why should you even be concerned about running in the dark, or why might it be dangerous?
Yeah. So, obviously there's a couple big reasons. The two that always come to mind first are obviously it's, I guess they're all safety issues really in the end, but one is safety from other people / vehicles, things like that. So people that cannot see you. And then there's safety from things that you can't see. So it could be stepping in a pothole or slipping on ice, things like that. So they all kind of revolve around safety, but it's just basically in the end, just not being able to see as well as you could at night.
And what do you think is the intersection between running in the dark and other winter conditions? And when I say that, I'm thinking for other people living in colder climates, when you're dealing with ice and snow, does that compound when you're running in the dark, or do you really have to think about these factors separately?
Yeah, I think it compounds a little in that in running in the winter, footing is always an issue, or is definitely an issue. It's something that you're kind of always have to be conscious of. And so because you're not able to see quite as well, the footing can even become more of an issue because you're just not quite sure perhaps like what that next step might be. And then also, generally speaking, or I shouldn't even say general, almost all the time when it's night or when it's dark, the temperature is going to be colder. So not only does that create more difficult conditions because it's colder, but also you deal with things like black ice. If you're running in the middle of the afternoon, you may get into a situation where something that would have been ice when it's early morning or at night would be complete ice, where in the middle of the day, it might be a puddle or something like that. So generally speaking, at night, it kind of exacerbates all the potential conditions that you see in the winter.
And putting aside all of that other stuff, the massive snowstorms or the ice, because obviously sometimes those become unrunnable, but are there any situations when darkness alone might be enough to really force you inside? And when I say that, I'm thinking about like near me, there's kind of a trail path where I know there's no lights the way you have on the street, is that ever completely unsafe? Or if you dress appropriately and have the right amount of light, can you still make that runnable?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of that is going to be super personal in the sense of, unfortunately, it's still in 2024. Like, we still, especially women, need to be wary of their conditions and need to be safe. And men too, not to say that only women are vulnerable to being attacked and things like that. So men need to be aware too, and not go into, kind of think of ourselves as superheroes. If somebody jumps out of a tree at you, it doesn't matter man or woman, and they get the jump on you, you're going to have a difficult time fending them off. So, that's a concern, always have to be thinking about. And then likewise, kind of like you mentioned, if you need to just really be cognizant of where you're going to run. So try to have routes planned ahead of time that if you know you're going to have to run in the dark or that it's going to be darker than usual, make sure that that route has lights. This applies more towards somebody who might start in the evening. But sometimes people forget that when they start and it's just a little bit dusk, that by the time they finish, it's going to be dark. And so kind of need to keep that in mind. Kind of the opposite in the morning. Usually you start when it's pitch black and finish sometimes maybe when it's getting light out. But yeah, definitely things to be, you just need to be, I guess, more aware of your surroundings and make decisions that are smart. And that's, as a runner, that is not always the easiest thing to do, because we sometimes just put the training and like getting fit in the next race, like ahead of everything. And sometimes we need to take a step back and say, am I making a decision that's like really safe for me? So I think that's always important. And, not safe in the sense of always like maybe getting hit by a car or just, getting mugged on the trail or something like that. But again, making sure that you're not going to ruin a marathon training buildup because you stepped in a hole and, twisted your ankle really bad or broke it or something like that.
So what advice would you give for those evening runners if you don't know how long you're going to run? Because I do know it can be kind of awkward when you're in complete broad daylight running with like a headlamp or bright lights.
Yeah, I mean, I always look at it like this. Like, I would rather look stupid while running than put myself in unsafe conditions. So if that means running with a headlight when it's light out, or running with a reflective vest or whatever when it's light out, things like that, like, I'll deal with that. I think we've all got enough run force run comments regardless, especially back in my college days, it was the short shorts. We used to wear the short shorts, short running shorts, no shirt. I was kind of gaunt and skinny person. So, you kind of just get used to being, not always like the most, I guess you would call it like socially acceptable gear and that kind of stuff. And so to me, I would rather just make sure that my training and myself are safe and rather than what I look, for sure. And I think that's something to keep in mind as well with anybody that's doing it is, if anything, go overboard. Like, it's better to be safe than sorry. It's better to have that running headlamp. It's better to have a reflective vest than not, no matter what the reasons for it are.
I think it's a good note to put safety first. I'll say when I'm running in the dark, there's something about it that just feels completely badass to be heading out in the pitch black and getting in that run. But I have to imagine that for anybody else who's actually able to see the outfit, I must look absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. And, it's one of those things where it's totally worth it. To me, it's better to be safe and than be sorry, for sure.
Yeah. So when you're going out and running in the dark or running in the cold, are there any specific physiological changes that happen in your body, or is it all kind of proprioception, or the way you're kind of seeing the path around you?
Yeah, so there's both. So for those that don't know, when you do run in the dark, because you're not able to see quite as well, it's actually going to feel like you're running a lot faster. And that gets into that proprioception of, I'd have to really dig into the science terms to understand like exactly what it is, but I do know that it's been studied and that it does make it feel like you're running a lot faster. And part of it's because you're not, generally speaking, when you run and you can see things going by you, you have a pretty innate gauge of like how fast things should be going by, like things in the distance, like how far they should be, how quickly they should be coming towards you. And because you're running at night and you're not quite able to see as well, then those general proprioceptive markings that you have are a little bit off. And so you'll always feel like you're running faster, which is a cool thing. I mean, I know I definitely enjoy it at night where I just feel like I'm flying sometimes. And I look at my watch and I'm like, oh, it's just running easy pace. I don't know why I feel like I'm running so fast today. So it's kind of a cool thing. It's a nice thing, but just something to be aware of. Maybe if you have to work out or something, just be aware that the effort might not match like how fast it feels like you're running, that kind of thing. In terms of the cold, there are some definite physiological adaptations or disadvantages that we put our body at. A lot of it comes down to our body's ability to warm up. So that's the first big one, is that unless you have a really solid, good warm up before you run, it's going to take your body a lot longer to warm up than it would in normal or even hot conditions, for sure. The second is kind of has to do with breathing, and then also how our blood flows through our body. Both of those are impacted by the cold quite a bit. And so not so much probably for easy runs from a physiological factor are you going to really like notice a big difference in the sense of having an impact on your pace, but definitely impact on your pace from if you're doing workouts, or especially if you're racing. There may be some races, especially if you do like Christmas runs or things like that you may be starting in the dark. I know like I did the Disney half marathon a long time ago, but I know I want to say it started like 4 a.m. or something like that. I mean, it was something crazy early. I don't think I finished. We barely finished, and it was light. So anyway, there are races where you will be starting in the dark, and potentially cold as well. And so keep that in mind, that your performance is going to be impacted by the cold as well. So there are some rough calculations that you can do in terms of like determining how many seconds per mile or per kilometer you're going to be slow with different conditions. But generally speaking, I like to say like anywhere from like 5 to 10 seconds per mile slower when anything under 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And usually anywhere from like 3 to 5 seconds per kilometer slow. I think it's about 0 degrees Celsius is like 32 Fahrenheit, somewhere around there. So, don't check me on that math, all my international listeners. But that's a pretty good estimation of like kind of what I use in terms of like just giving myself some leeway when it comes to like how I'm feeling and what my workout paces should be.
Yeah, I can vouch for the 32 degrees Fahrenheit being 0, but any other metric in Fahrenheit, I'm totally hopeless with the conversions.
Yeah, same with me. But yeah, so that's how I've always approached workouts in the cold like that, is especially starting out. I just give myself that 5 to 10 seconds per mile window, like leeway, and just say, okay, like, all right, my target might be X. If I'm 5 seconds slow, or I give myself the ability to start out 5 to 10 seconds slow. If I end up hitting my pace, that's great, no big deal. But if I'm 5 to 10 seconds slow, then I just say, okay, that's the effort that because of the cold that I'm running in now.
Yeah, and Jeff, you touched on something really interesting that I noticed too, which is that running in the dark, you do feel like you're going so much faster. And I do think it's really cool to be able to go out and just feel like you're running really quick. But maybe more beneficial on an easy run when I almost want to feel like I'm going faster than I am. For runners who are coming out and trying to get in workouts, maybe in the peak of training where your pace is a factor, running in the dark and it might not feel like you're running at the right pace. How do you dial that in and make sure that you're actually training the right effort level?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll actually flip it and say, I think that's actually an awesome benefit of running in the dark in those situations, because that's what happens to a lot of runners when they get to races, especially those that aren't as experienced, that maybe have only done a couple races or maybe never raced at all. And you hear this all the time in marathons, especially half marathons, where we'll tell athletes, okay, make sure you go out slow. We'll give them the race plan, like these are the splits you need to hit. And then they come, they report back to us and they're like, oh, I was like 20 seconds per mile fast. Like this is like the common refrain in Boston. And, they're like, but it didn't feel that fast. Like I felt like I was running, way slower than I thought, blah, blah, blah. And so the situation of, running in the dark, making it feel like you're running a lot faster than you are, is actually a great training tool that you can use or advantage that you can use to say, okay, I really need to hone in on my pace here and understand like what this pace feels like under all conditions. And so, in the dark, obviously it's the proprioception that's kind of throwing things off. In the race, it's usually the adrenaline, other people around you, that kind of thing that's throwing that internal sense of pace off. And so it's just one of those things. It's one of those things where you have to work at it. There's really no like secret, easy strategy to undo it or to make it not be a factor. But it is one of those things that does a lot, that the more you practice it and the better you get at it, the better you can translate that to race day and potentially not make that mistake.
Is that something you think you only have to practice if your race is in the dark, or is that beneficial even for runners who might have a race in daylight?
Oh, for sure. It's beneficial across the board, because regardless of when your race is happening, in the race, usually the factor that leads to people going faster than they thought is the adrenaline, the courses, the crowd, the people around them, that kind of thing. So it's a factor that's outside of their internal sense of pace. And so regardless of what time they're starting or the conditions that they're in. And so whatever you can do in training that helps you train yourself to hone in on your internal self of pace in regardless of outside factors is a good tool that you can use in your training to ensure that doesn't happen on race day. It's really hard on race day to do things that you've never done before. So, not that we want to be running in the dark, et cetera, but like it is one of those things sometimes that we can maybe trick ourselves and say, okay, there's an advantage to this. Like this is a benefit. This is going to benefit me in my race, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I really like this theme of how to get in intense training and keep fitness in the dark. So I want to keep rolling with it with one more question, which comes back to your point about planning your route. And we'll come back to the piece about planning your route as it pertains to safety, because obviously that's a key consideration. But in terms of finding ways during the winter time to get in intense training when it's dark or cold, how do you make sure that you're planning out the most appropriate place for your workout?
Yeah, for me, it always comes down to planning ahead. So, for a lot of people, they live in the same area for a long time, so they generally know the areas around themselves that are well lit, have good footing, maybe not be iced over, et cetera. So a lot of it just comes down to planning. And so if you're somebody that's maybe just starting to run now, or maybe something shifted where now you have to do night runs, whether it be in the morning or at night, you can just drive around and look for roads that are well lit. And so, you can drive around, make sure that they have street lights, make sure all the lights are working and that they're lighting up the street well. You can even go for a walk or go for a run during the day in that during that route that you might plan, and just make sure that the footing's good, that there's nothing crazy that like if maybe the street has a lot of potholes or the sidewalk is really uneven in a lot of places. Like just look for things that if you were running in the dark that you might not be able to see, or that might impact your footing, that kind of thing. What I've always found, and because we're talking about combining running in the dark with running in the winter, also understanding where streets tend to have sidewalks that are plowed or shoveled, or areas in general that are plowed first, that kind of thing, that don't have as much snow accumulation, that kind of thing. Those can all be important things to just kind of factor in. That way, when the conditions do hit, you have a play and you're already ready to go, not trying to figure out at the last minute, like, oh, where can I run here? That kind of thing.
I was going to say, you talked about walking the route and seeing if there's good footing, but oftentimes if you're walking it one day, that doesn't necessarily mean that when you're running there the next, there's still going to be good footing depending what the weather conditions are.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always some factors that you might not be able to take in. But generally speaking, like I said, most people, if they live in the same area, if you live in the area all the time, like you have a pretty good feel of like what streets are cleared well, good footing, just in general. And then you kind of just avoid maybe your less, I guess, civilized routes, because I know I always had routes that are like a little bit more off the beaten path than I maybe kind of just do for fun sometimes, and just try to realize that you need to avoid those. And stick to like the main stuff. And sometimes it's a little more boring, but boring is better than injured or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I often find that loops tend to work better in the wintertime, just because it's hard to find a long route for a more major marathon workout that's going to be well plowed and not going to be mind-numbingly boring.
For sure. And I also found that, especially for workouts and stuff, it was almost always worth traveling to go do the workout. As much as an extra burden that was a lot of times, it was definitely worth it. So sometimes depending on where you're at, but like most of the times I've lived near parks or areas that had either no street traffic or whatever it may be, in a situation where I knew for sure it was going to be good footing, decent lighting, no traffic. And even though it was a 15-20 minute drive, for the workout, that was always worth the effort, because it allowed me to really hone in and make sure I was getting in the effort those days, The easy days, you can kind of, whatever, if something happens, you can make up for it. But the workouts, I always found it was better to drive somewhere.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite route that you would typically drive to for your workouts?
So I've lived in a lot of different places. I've traveled around quite a bit. It's not only professionally and also unprofessionally. So yeah, I would say that I don't have like a favorite off the top of my head in terms of all time, but I would say that every place I lived, I have had a place where I really was like, okay, that's my go-to spot. If it's snowing or if it's cold or whatever it may be, like a workout spot that was almost pretty consistent for sure.
And when you're looking for a workout now, I'm not sure how many workouts you're doing these days, but obviously not dealing with as much cold, but maybe just in the dark. Is there something you're really looking for in your area to get that right?
Yeah. So for me, especially now, you're right. Like now I don't have to deal with the cold and snow. So that's much easier. But for me, it's all about lighting and footing. Oddly enough, like I am somebody that when I run, like I'm not sure if I have necessarily problems with it, but like if the footing is not good, either I'm not confident in where I'm going, or like I hate trail running. Like, and I'm not dissing anybody that runs trails. Like I understand why you love them, but for me, like whatever it is, like I roll my ankles. I've rolled my ankle on a bike path. Like there's literally like nothing but a bike path, and I've rolled my ankle. So for me, footing is like the most important thing. So that's what I always look at first. So lighting and footing, and kind of lighting is part of the footing because I want to be able to see where I'm going. So for me, those are the two big things. Like I just need to have a nice smooth surface, know that there's nothing in the way, that kind of stuff. I know people like, Rory, one of our coaches at Runners Connect, like he's an avid trail runner. Like, I don't know, his ankles must be like rubber bands because he can just go and he's like galloping, like we in Flagstaff. He's like on all these trails. I'm like, oh, I can't even walk on this. So for sure, everybody's different. Some, like you said, like somebody like Rory the footing for him might just be not a big deal, not a big issue, just, kind of thing. So everybody's a little bit different, but that's what I always look for.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm a little bit more in your camp. I think I thank my PT just about every day for recommending foot exercises because otherwise I'd have rolled my ankle several times this training block.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's maybe come back to the safety piece. So we had touched on planning your route to find a good workout spot, but maybe just in general to make sure that you're finding a route that's safe. Is there anything else that you want to keep in mind?
Yeah. So again, the other big thing usually to me is like, this kind of goes along with safety, but like traffic I call it, I'll say people, but I mean, in the sense that like, you kind of want to know that your route is in a safe area and it's not, you're not going to have potentially people hiding in the bushes or, that kind of thing. So I say traffic from cars. To me, those are always the number one risk for runners, especially because at night, they can't see you very well. They're not paying attention. If it's early morning, they may not be fully awake. Cold conditions, they may freaking have frost all over their car windshield, barely be able to see you. So to me, anywhere where there's less traffic is a benefit because it's less, I'm always very wary when I see cars. I'm always running against traffic in the sense that I want to be able to see the cars coming towards me because I want to be able to react to what they're doing. So less traffic is always good. And then, like I said, just make sure that you're in safe neighborhoods areas where there may be other people around, something where you're not out in the middle of nowhere. If something were to happen, those kind of things. So those are kind of almost general, like regardless of whether you're running in the dark or not. But I think you just have to be a little bit more cognizant of them when you are running in the dark.
Just reading between the lines here, would you recommend typically that runners in the wintertime tend to stick a little bit more to routes or areas that they're familiar with? And the reason I ask that is because you talked about traffic or footing, but these are probably things where most people know within a certain vicinity, but maybe not if you're driving further out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say that for me, in the winter, for a lot of time, is one of those things where you just kind of have to accept some of the boredom that comes with that. Running the same route a bunch of times extra, kicking it to the treadmill a couple times if you really, really need to. If you're somebody that doesn't enjoy the treadmill, that is. There's just some boredom that you have to accept with that. And so I think anytime you have seasons, there's positives and negatives to all the seasons, right? And so we just have to look at the winter as being one of the negatives, being obviously training in the cold and dark and stuff, but also maybe a little bit of boredom and just having to do the same routes more frequently than you might normally do just because you want to put yourself in good conditions.
And when you're going on those runs, do you have any tips for runners to make sure that cyclists or drivers can see them for safety reasons?
Yeah, so I would say that investing in high quality reflective gear is really important. We're recording this as November 1st, so we got Black Friday coming up, we got Christmas coming up. So if you're not somebody that has that and you're going to do a lot of running this winter, that's great ideas. Or if there's somebody in your family that's just starting to get running or doesn't have that equipment, those are great gifts. So for me, I used to, I don't do it quite as much anymore because I'm not running in the dark quite as much, but reflective vest, very lightweight. You can put it over anything. So you pretty much dress normally and just have that vest on. Super nice, super reflective. A lot of, you can do, they're like bands or like, basically you can wrap them around hats. And I wrap one around my head and then wrap one around my wrists, and then legs as well, just to add more reflection there. It's not expensive. I want to say it's basically just like a wrist wrap, and you can get one for your head as well. Basically like a headband kind of thing. I want to say it was no more for the whole body. I think it came with 2 legs, 2 arms, and 1 head. I want to say it was like $20, $25. So it was, it's one of those things where it's like well worth the investment. It's not super expensive to do, where it's like, if you can imagine like what that might prevent, luckily I've never been hit by a car, but I always thought about it like the idea that just wearing something like that could prevent me from getting hit by a car was like a no-brainer to just have it on, that kind of thing. I know I don't think we've touched on this, but like headlamps, headlights, those can be really helpful. I don't love them. I remember when I first started, I tried one and I was like, oh, this is going to be the best thing ever. I'm going to like totally see, but like it definitely bounces with you. So like it's definitely not like it's not like you have a car headlight in front of you. But it can definitely be helpful. I've done the running with flashlight stuff. And I would do that occasionally, just not so much. So like, it was almost more like, sometimes you come across areas where you just can't see quite as well. And it's like, oh, if I just had a quick light, you can get these mini handheld flashlights that are like weigh almost nothing and are like super bright. Nowadays I think you can even get them like USB, so you don't need to charge batteries, that kind of thing. But it's just nice to have one to have just in case there is an area where like maybe a street light went out or something happened, just to have it, just to be sure. It also helps with traffic, because I've noticed sometimes if I thought a car was coming near me and maybe didn't see me or something like that, I would just flash the flashlight a little bit because I'm running at them. It was just another point of security of like, okay, they definitely I'm pretty sure they saw the flashlight. So one of those things, again, it's really not a big deal to run with a flashlight all the time. Just in that off case that you need it. You don't even need to have it on all the time. Just to have it. It's one of those things that's like super helpful.
Yeah, Jeff, I think you just inadvertently answered what was going to be my next question, but do you recommend running against traffic or with traffic?
Yeah, 100% against traffic. Again, big thing is you want to be able to see them and react to them. So if you, like I said, with my headlight, there are times when I just had an instinct or a feeling that the car didn't see me. It was like too far over, wasn't giving me enough room, especially if there's no other traffic on the road. So I want to be able to see it. And like, I don't think it's really ever happened to me, but I know it's happened to others, like friends, where the car gets close enough that it can't see you, and it's you're kind of like a last minute, like almost have to jump out of the way. Like I would rather do that than be hit from behind, just having no clue. So.
Oh, 100%. Was just on a run this morning, and a driver's kind of coming around the corner, and they don't even look both ways, and you always kind of get that little wave from the driver to thank you, as if you have a choice when they're coming through without stopping.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, like when you're a full-time runner and you like, I've noticed this when I like approach traffic stops as a driver, like I'm so much more cognizant of like giving people the right of way and making sure that I'm looking both ways, because it is really easy to just say like, oh, you come to a stop, I only have to look left because I'm going right, et cetera, and like maybe not see that person coming from the other direction. So, it's always better to just for you to be able to make the decision and the reaction if needed, for sure.
Yeah. Let's maybe get into how to dress for running in the dark and in the wintertime in general. So we talked about headlamps and lights. What do you think your overall outfit should look like if you're heading out, let's say, for an early morning run? It's 20 degrees Fahrenheit out. What are you putting on?
Yeah, so I would say 20 degrees Fahrenheit, we're talking like -5, negative 10-ish, probably like negative 5 Celsius. So for me, I'm wearing a hat with some type of reflective on it, whether it's reflective built into the hat or like an extra piece on it. I would probably wear like a medium weight running jacket. Most of the running jackets these days have like reflection on them, or at least a lot of the ones that I've purchased recently do. If it doesn't, I would just add, again, that one of those like cheap vests that you can buy that's reflective. Then under that, I would have probably just a lightweight, like turtleneck, for lack of a better term, but something lightweight, moisture wicking. Like generally speaking, when it comes to running in the winter, it's okay to be cold the first mile or two. Generally, that's kind of recommended because depending how far you're going, but like for me, I'm running about anywhere from 45 minutes to 90 minutes. So after the first 10 or 15 minutes, you're probably going to get pretty warmed up. And so you spend 10 to 15 minutes being a little bit cold. So that way the last 45 minutes to an hour, you kind of feel appropriate temperature. Whereas I think a lot of newer runners overdress to start. So they, you look at it, it's like, oh my God, it's 20 degrees. And they pile up all the clothes. And then 15 minutes in, they're sweating bullets. And that not only is uncomfortable, but it can get dangerous. That's how runners or athletes put themselves in like hypothermic conditions because they sweat so much, and then still have an hour to run, or endurance athletes in the cold conditions. So err towards underdressing a little bit the first few miles, and then topping it off, I would have a pair of running tights, probably like I said, those straps around my ankles just to understand the reflection, and that's pretty much it. Well, gloves probably too. I use gloves quite a bit. But that's how I would go. And I think that's the biggest tip, is just make sure that you don't overdress the first couple miles, especially running in the morning when it's dark, when it's cold. It's really easy to overdress because you get out of bed and you're just generally colder. And so you kind of have the mindset of like wanting to get warm. And so you wanting to overdress. Like I would say that's probably one of the mistakes that most athletes make, because again, you can put yourself in dangerous situations if you are running for a really long time. But generally, it's also going to make you less uncomfortable if you just dress appropriately.
I find that mistake's way easier to make at the start of the winter time. I'm usually acclimated by January or February, but when you're in November, December, the tendency is always to want to dress super warm since you're used to that summer weather.
Yeah, for sure. Especially those first few cold days, the first real cold day that you have, you wake up and it's like really cold in your house or whatever, and maybe you forgot to put the heat up or whatever it is. Yeah, it's easy to overdress for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about like ankle lights. I don't know that I've heard of that or tried it before. What's that about?
Oh, I must have bought them on Amazon or maybe like Running Warehouse or something like that. But they're just like reflective bands. Like they just have a Velcro. So and the outside is obviously reflective. They kind of light up a little bit too. I don't know if it's 100% reflective or it's like a little bit of a light. But yeah, it's just a Velcro thing, and you just strap it around your ankle. For me, I like to have it because it's something that's moving. So with the vest, sometimes, like I've noticed, especially when I'm driving, the vests work great because the way the light reflects off the vest, it creates shines in different areas. But sometimes if the car is coming at you direct and your upper body maybe isn't moving much anyway, like that light they might kind of wonder like what it is, and might not think it's a person. But when you get the leg lights, that can definitely, you can see those moving. And I think that triggers in people's heads like, oh, that's a runner. That's somebody like moving, not like maybe not trying to figure out when it might otherwise be. So like I said, they're pretty cheap, reusable. You just Velcro them on whatever you're wearing. So.
That's pretty cool. I think I've heard of as well, like outerwear jackets that kind of have some type of reflective material built into them.
Yeah, most of the jackets I purchased, most of the winter running jackets I purchased, have had something. It's not like when I talk about like buying a vest, like I mean that thing is like all it is that reflective tape, kind of stuff. But most of the jackets I've had have been have at least had panels that have been reflective, or strips on it somewhere that have been reflective. So I would say most of the companies these days are putting some type of thing on it already. But again, it's one of those things like adding that vest really is not, I don't know what's on. So it's, to me, it's like an extra layer of safety for, just in case.
100%. And when you're dressing for weather, do you look at the actual temperature or real feel?
Oh, I always do the real feel because you got to watch that wind, especially depending on where you're at. Like, so the coldest I've ever run in was negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So
Wow.
I don't know what that would be Celsius, but
It's
was in
probably pretty
Gunnison,
close to the same.
yeah, yeah. It was in Gunnison, Colorado. But it didn't really feel that cold because there was no wind and it was dry. It was at elevation and no wind. So really didn't feel that cold. But I've trained in Michigan. That was probably the coldest around that I've run. And I mean, if it's 20, but there's a 20-mile-an-hour wind, like that sucks. Like that is cold, you know? So I would say for sure you want to look at like the real temp because that factors in like humidity and wind, which do make a big difference in terms of like how you're going to feel. The wind being the bigger one, but humidity as well.
Jeff, I just looked it up for curiosity, and negative 40 Fahrenheit is in fact also negative 40 Celsius.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's one of those things. Like I kind of did it almost because I wanted to say that I could do it. But I'm also a runner, and so I was like, well, I'm definitely getting in my 6 miles today. Like, you know, like nothing's gonna stop me. So it was nighttime. It was negative 40. But again, I didn't feel that cold. I mean, but I was I had goggles. I had the baklava. I mean, there was not a thing of skin protruding for sure. But because it wasn't windy, it really didn't feel too bad.
Okay, so at what point do you throw in the towel and run indoors? Is it minus 60, minus 70?
Well, I think if I had the option, I don't think I had the option that day to run on a treadmill. I was staying at a friend's house. So I don't think I had the option, but I think had I had the option, I probably would have done the treadmill.
But let's say
I think opting to do the treadmill is always a good choice. You know, obviously we've talked. I think it was you and I that did the episode about it. But there's the boredom in there, but a lot of times it's the best option.
And let's put aside the temperatures now in terms of like snowy or icy conditions. What's that distinguishing mark where you know the difference between when you just need to maybe bundle up or wear some shoes that have slightly better traction versus when really for safety reasons you should be either staying inside or skipping your run entirely?
Yeah, that's a tough distinction. I mean, I will say that I'm probably not the best person to ask because I run in some crazy conditions, like stupid, you know, like you finish and you're like, well, that was dumb. Like there was like, you know, I was working so hard that didn't end up being an easy run, whatever. But I would say that like anything that's like you kind of touched upon it, like anything that's impacting your footing or your ability to like run the appropriate effort, I think for sure you should just try to move it indoors or switch things around so that way you can run on a day that's appropriate. That's how I like when I like talk with athletes that I coach and things like that. That's the delineation I make is like, all right, it may suck and that's fine. Like sucking is different than not being able to do what you need to do. So if you can do what you need to do and you want to go outside, then that's fine. But if you feel like your footing or your ability to run the right effort are going to be impacted, then it's probably better to just stay inside, as much as that might stink if you're not somebody that like enjoys doing stuff on the treadmill or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you just get a monumental storm, I'd love to talk about how runners can still get in their training. And I'll assume maybe you have access to a treadmill, but to me personally, and maybe to a lot of runners listening, it's just not realistic to get in a 20-mile long run on the treadmill and be running 6 or 7 times a week. So say for like an average runner that you might be working with, how might you adjust their training for those types of conditions?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So part of it is like where they are in their training cycle. So if it's, you know, I kind of break training cycles into 2 phases when I give advice like this. Like I talk about being like race specific and then like general build up. So let's say that you were training for, like, I know you're training for Boston. No, you were in Boston last year?
Valencia.
Yeah, sorry. I was something you were doing Boston, but anyway, let's say you are training for Boston because we're recording this in November. So like from now until like probably February, you can be pretty flexible with your training. So you can move things around if you need to skip a long run, even, you know, that kind of thing. Like you have a lot of flexibility in your training. So I would say for the most part in those situations, like if you're more than 16 weeks out from your race, maybe even more than like 14 or 15 weeks out, then you can pretty much move your training around as much as you need. So that concludes skipping a long run. It could be like swapping things out, that kind of thing. When you start getting closer and like, you know, when those long runs, like making sure that you have those long runs in the bag and making sure that not doing it on that day impacts everything down the road. Like in those cases, then you kind of just either have to get creative or really rework the schedule to make sure that you can get things in. So like one of the biggest tips that I've learned, at least in my experience running, is that there are almost always areas, unless you live like really rurally, at least in the US, there are almost always areas that get plowed very quickly. And those are going to be government areas that have government function and or schools. So to me, what I found is that the city will always prioritize plowing in those areas first. And so that's where I would just go to run. Even if like the school around where I lived, almost always like there was a block that you could at least do a mile, and I would just do loops as much as it sucked, but I knew it was plowed. It was plowed consistently, those types of things. So if you are gearing up to run this winter, try to think about where either schools are or government buildings are or areas where they're going to plow first. And you can always try to at least get there to do anything that's super important that you might need to get in that day. If you don't have access to a treadmill, and you want to make sure you get in the workouts or runs that you need to do. So that's kind of the recommendation. That's what I've always done for me. And it's worked pretty well for the most part.
Yeah, I think building in that flexibility is so important this time of year because it's just the reality for people living in a lot of areas in the US or elsewhere that you're not going to always be able to do the workout as you might have hoped.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, and I tell this with athletes that we work with, is that always keep in mind with a workout that we're after a specific effort, right? And so the paces that we give you or a coach would give you are all designed to elicit a specific effort. So it's not because like only that and that pace only is going to elicit the training benefits we want. We think that pace is going to put you at the effort that elicits the physiological benefit. So if it's if it's 20 degrees and the wind is howling and it's cold, you may be 10 or 15 seconds per mile slower than your goal pace for that workout, but that effort is probably the same. So always try to keep that in mind when it comes to that. And remember that as you start your workout or you go to plan the workout and say, okay, I'm going to be 10 to 15 per second per mile slow on this workout because of the weather conditions today. And that's okay. Like the goal is to hit this effort, this threshold effort, or this speed workout, whatever it may be. As long as I hit that effort, regardless of what the pace is, then I'm accomplishing the goal. I'm accomplishing the goal for the day. So that's how I try to adapt my training to the winter, and just remember that you can't always hit every split, every mile. And not even try sometimes, just realize what your situation is. And it's that, we'd say the same in the summer for people running in the summer. Like if it's 90 degrees and humid, don't go into that workout thinking, yeah, I'm going to hit all my workout paces like that, because it's a different effort. So different conditions, same principles apply.
100%. And sometimes it's just a different type of effort. I find a lot of the time in the wintertime, I end up running on snow that's not completely covered, and it might be up to 15, 20 seconds a kilometer slower or 30 seconds a mile. And I might not quite hit that same aerobic effort if it were plowed properly, but my calves typically are completely drained by the end of that because there's so much muscular effort required to get through that snow. Yeah,
exactly. And the other thing I tell athletes too is that, when we do a build up to a training, like if you think about all of the workouts that you do over that 16, 20 week period, like I always look at it like every workout is a drop in the bucket. So like we have this big bucket of fitness and every workout is just a drop. So if one drop is not the best, like if you have one workout that isn't fantastic because it conditions something you can't control, like it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of workouts that go in there. You just kind of got to go do your best. And it goes back to that, I think, philosophy that I've had for a long time that I try to impart on athletes now is like consistency trumps perfection, and so it's better to be consistent and just get in the work than it is to be in perfect conditions,
Yeah. Let's maybe dummy proof this advice just a little bit and say, if you're somebody who either is new to an area that has snow, or maybe you've lived there for a long time, but this is your first time as a runner going through the winter, what would you recommend that runner do to prepare so that they're ready for those winter and dark conditions?
Yeah, this is a great question, or a great way to phrase the question. So first thing, I would get the right gear. So making sure that you have good warm weather running clothes. making sure that you have even, I guess, shoes as well. So we can talk a little bit about this if you want, but there are things you can strap on your shoes. They're called like Yak Tracks or other brands similar to that, but you can basically strap them into your shoes, and it's like it's basically something that goes on the bottom of your shoe that gives you a lot more traction in the snow, hard packed snow or ice and things like that. You can also do screw shoes, which we have an article about. I would tell people to read that article. We'll link it in the show notes rather than try to explain it. But just first make sure you get the gear. And then that gear also includes reflective, some type of reflective equipment. It could be headbands, vests, whatever it may be. Get the gear now, make sure that you like it, all that kind of stuff. Get that taken care of. Second, start to plan your routes now when there's not snow, when it's not super dark out all the time. Start planning 2 or 3 routes that you know that you can do that are going to have good lighting, low traffic, good footing in dark conditions. Likewise, you can think about where the schools are or government buildings, and start thinking about how you might plan a route if you need to do a workout for something. And that's the only place you could go. Like, what would that loop look like for you? How would you get there, et cetera? And it doesn't take long. Like, I'm talking about like an hour to just plan that out. And then you have that in your pocket. So that way, if inevitably when you have those really cold days or really snowy days this winter, you have the options at your back. You don't have to think about it. The thing that I think derails a lot of people in the winter, is just those cold mornings you wake up and you're not super motivated and you're like, the last thing I want to do is go out running at 4:00 in the morning again, especially when you have decisions to make, like, oh, where am I going to run? Oh my God, it's whatever. Like, if you can get that decision taken care of before you even have to make it, then the chances that you're going to skip the run or something's going to happen are significantly less.
I couldn't agree more. And also in the morning time, it takes at least double the time to get ready when you have all those layers in the wintertime. So any way that you can cut down on the effort required is going to make it so much easier to get in your run.
Yeah. For me, I always had, I don't think I never necessarily wrote it out, but I think you could, if it was like your first, year running in cold conditions, of like, I would have like I just had it like into my head, like, okay, this is what I wear when it's 40. This is what I wear when it's 30. This is what I wear when it's raining, when it's, you know what I mean? Like, I had outfits like pretty much already in my head. And so it wasn't really I didn't have to make a decision about what I was going to wear. Like, I pretty much woke up and I looked at the weather. I said, okay, you can even look at it the night before, but I woke up, look at the weather. All right, this is what it is. These are my 30-degree pants. These are my 30-degree, shirts or whatever. And you go, like, not having to debate like, oh my God, what am I going to wear? Like, that's a huge thing for sure.
Jeff, living in a warmer climate, do you even have to check the weather anymore?
Yeah, it's funny. Not really. It's pretty much the same all the time. Every once in a while I'll wake up and it'll be like more because I live so close to the ocean where the clouds will come in and it'll be like almost feels like it's raining when it's not really raining. That's probably the worst weather I run in now. But I like that. That makes me feel like I'm like running when I was back in like a teenager. So I like that. But yeah, luckily, no.
Wow. Well, I am very jealous of you being able to run in those much, much warmer conditions, especially as it starts to get colder here. But I think that is a good foreshadowing to get ready for what's to come, both from a lights perspective and also from making sure that I've got everything around to be able to bundle up.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope everybody watching and listening to this, at least got something out of it, at least a couple tips that they can put towards the running this year. Sometimes all it takes is 1 or 2 like tips or ideas in your head that can get you through some of those difficult times, whether it be physical or mental. Training in the winter can definitely be a grind. So hopefully there's something in there that gets somebody through it. So for sure.
Absolutely. And you've given me a new idea as well with the ankle reflective lights. So thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, check them out on Amazon or like Running Retail or something like that. But they're pretty cool. I like them. It's just one of those things that's an added safety measure for sure.
Cool. Awesome. I'll check them out. Thanks so much, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thanks, Corey.